The two previous lectures discussed how messengers from all ages and cultures have always conveyed the same message of wisdom, although packaged in different ways. A message of the underlying unity of all life. A message of the possibility of reaching higher states of consciousness, of growth, and that we are eternal pilgrims, allowing us to experience more and more of that unity consciously. And the message from a cooperative hierarchy of life, of consciousness, to which we are inextricably linked and from which we can actively draw inspiration. The messengers make us aware of the existence of beings who are even further advanced in developing broader possibilities of consciousness. Exalted souls, heroes, angels, bodhisattvas, Buddhas, gods, to repeat just a few of the designations mentioned. Among them are beings who actively strive to inspire others who come after them with compassion and the wisdom they have acquired. They've also organized themselves and work together at all levels or degrees or stages of consciousness. The hierarchy of compassion. Such a partnership also exists at our human level. A branch of this hierarchy, you might say. It is also called the Lodge of Wisdom and Compassion, and the most advanced people are part of it. In short, we have explained how the flow of wisdom and compassion works, what the message of wisdom is, and that this flow originates from an infinite source, the cosmic heart. We've also explained that the message is conveyed by different messengers in a way that is appropriate to the stage of development of people and their culture. Well, the second lecture discussed how the hierarchy of wisdom and compassion works, how inspiration can always flow from higher realms of consciousness to lower ones, and that the Lodge of Wisdom and Compassion always acts as a link in this process, working by inspiring, not by imposing. In a well-known Buddhist sutra, inspiration is also compared to the monsoon rain. It falls equally on all beings, and each can drink their fill, and thus grow at their own pace and strength. In the same way, the teaching or inspiration from the hierarchy descends upon all beings, each of whom can benefit from it in their own way. And where there is a suitable bed, the water can flow more easily and quickly and irrigate the land, just as a river with all its branches allows water to flow across the land. Similarly, the Lodge of Wisdom and Compassion, as part of the hierarchy of compassion, is of crucial importance to us. It is an essential lifeline, the link that transmits the heavenly spiritual forces to the manifested earth. Well, how can each of us experience that flow ourselves? Or rather, how can we become transmitters for that flow? It has already been noted that compassion as a motive, an attitude, a mentality, is of decisive importance. If the motive is based on compassion and focused on the whole, based on the unity of all life, and focused on ethical action, then this is also referred to as working from the heart. You then realize that your own personal self is an illusion, and that your own core is the same as the core of any other being. And when you realize this, you will see the other as yourself. And it will be logical that your thoughts and actions are no longer based on your personal self, but on the whole. Because you identify with the totality and forget yourself for a short or long period of time, your frequency is attuned to those beings who've continuously identified with that totality, the Lodge of Wisdom and Compassion. Contact has been made, a channel has been formed, and the flow can begin. And the inspiration from the Lodge of Wisdom and Compassion flows through the heart of every human being in whom this motive of compassion lives. The current then flows from heart to heart. Well, we will elaborate on all these thoughts in this third lecture, in which we will build up a picture together of how we, as human beings, can help in practice to receive and pass on that flow as purely as possible. Theosophical literature speaks of living with a pure heart, an eager intellect, and the desire to develop an unveiled spiritual vision as steps toward this goal. But what is meant by a pure heart? Why is an eager intellect necessary? And what does an unveiled spiritual vision mean? Well, in other words, we are talking then about the question, how can we open our hearts to the flow of wisdom and compassion that flows from the heart of the universe through every opening it can find? And that is what we will now explore in more detail in this lecture. Opening our own spiritual heart begins when we are touched inwardly with something that touches our heart. And here too, the story of the great teachers and sages offer us points of reference. Take, for example, the story of the Buddha, who is repeatedly touched inwardly at the beginning of his life. He grows up protected as Prince Siddhartha at his father's court, where he wants for nothing. But as soon as he ventures outside the palace walls and sees the suffering of the world in the form of old age, illness, and death, his heart is stirred. He is so moved that he decides to flee the palace. He leaves his family, city, and country and goes in search of wisdom to eliminate all suffering. And how many people were touched deep inside, opening their hearts by the example of Socrates, who followed his idea of justice, even though it cost him his life. This living example inspired many others, from the Stoic Emperor Marcus Aurelius to the freedom fighter and former president Václav Havel. By opening the heart, the flow of wisdom and compassion transmitted by the Lodge can be received and retransmitted by us. In practical terms, you can think of it as the moment when the plug is inserted into a socket, creating a flow. Anyone can be inspired, provided their heart is open to it. Now that may sound a bit vague, and you may be wondering, how do I do that? But that's mainly because we're not yet used to listening to this. Yet, there will be many here who recognize that their heart has been touched by something at some point. We do not mean emotion or feeling of pity, but compassion, whereby you experience the will and responsibility to alleviate suffering. A prerequisite for this is what is also referred to as a pure heart. A pure heart means that you are honest, sincere, trustworthy, and selfless, and that you are open to what is happening around you. When your pure heart is touched, you feel responsible to take action. You feel that you are being called upon. And there is a cautious intuitive knowledge that improvement is possible, even though at that moment you may not yet not know what to do with it or how to shape it. But your heart is open to receiving the flow of inspiration, just as the Buddha to be needed his moments of reflection after yet another confrontation with the suffering in the world. The fact that you feel compelled to do something about it is an important first step. Well, let us return once more to the universal teaching that the messengers always teach. That there is a common source behind the various expressions of life. We ourselves are also part of this, and have within us all the possibilities to become aware of it and to express that sense of unity. Think, for example, of the idea in Buddhism that every being is essentially Buddha nature. That each of us has the possibility to rise above the suffering that is inherent in this world. Working from the heart means consciously or intuitively starting from the underlying unity, from the connectedness with all other beings. The unity of life with which we are inextricably connected in our hearts. As this awareness of universal unity grows within you, as you begin to recognize it, you will no longer live only for yourself, seeking and using knowledge and wisdom solely for your own glory and honor. No, you will increasingly live for others. Consider the golden rule, which can be found in various forms in all traditions. The rule that says you should treat others as you would like to be treated yourself. And ultimately, you will put yourself at the service of all living things. In Buddhism, this is called the Bodhisattva ideal, which means that you suspend your own access to enlightenment in nirvana in order to help others acquire wisdom. And so Plato speaks of someone who returns to the cave to help his fellow human beings who are still in ignorance to see through the illusion. As humans, we are capable of recognizing that unity, of which we are part, within ourselves. We often recognize it outside ourselves first, until we realize that we also recognize it within ourselves. That is a continuous process. Unfortunately, we often do not yet recognize that unity, because of the illusion that we as humans are separate from each other and other living beings. We do not yet sufficiently realize that the personal self is an illusion. As personalities, we do not yet continuously perceive ourselves as inextricably connected to all life around us. Many people are not even aware of the fact that there is an underlying unity of life. But if you are touched inwardly and listen to your heart, you will experience a deeper unity of all life. You will experience on a deeper level that you want to contribute to this, to express it. And after this inner stirring, where the chord of compassion has been struck, just as the inner chord of the Buddha was struck, the question follows, how can I help? How can I find answers? Well, in asking that question marks the start of a conscious search for wisdom. This is where an eager intellect comes in handy, whereby you don't just accept things at face value, but examine everything critically. You need vision, a vision of life based on universal truths that apply to every situation in life. It requires insight into the underlying laws of nature, into the inner processes that cause the outer ones. It is about getting to know the heart of things, that we learn to look at the inner or the essence of things, learn to look beyond the outer form. This is not just curiosity for more knowledge, but seeking knowledge for something greater than yourself. To find answers to life's questions, to be able to help others with it, and to apply it and bring it to life in your own life, so that knowledge truly becomes wisdom. And these life questions are not about personal gain, but about elevating the whole. The search for wisdom is not just a search for wisdom that you can learn from others, such as the messengers mentioned earlier. No, wisdom is self-knowledge. It is the path inward. Socrates says about this, "What is the point of learning all kinds of things if I don't even know myself?" And the messengers are not talking about the outer self, the role we play as a personality during this one life, but rather about the inner, higher self, the actor, who life after life takes on roles on the stage of life in order to learn his life lessons. It is therefore not only about acquiring knowledge, but even more about living according to it and passing on the knowledge acquired. The letters of the masters state that receptivity must be as great as the desire to pass on your insights. Enlightenment must come from within. So not only learning to recognize unity, but also living from within, based on that idea of unity. Treating others as you would like to be treated. Sharing the knowledge and wisdom you've gained with others in a way that can also touch their hearts. So that a flow from heart to heart can also occur between the people each of us meets. As mentioned, opening the heart begins when we are touched inwardly by something that is close to our hearts. If our motive is pure, and we work from that pure heart, then in our search for wisdom, with our eager intellect, and the desire to obtain an unveiled spiritual vision, we will also find it. For what does the desire to obtain an unveiled spiritual vision mean? Well, in practice, it means that you are open to the wisdom of others, including those from other times and other cultures, and that you realize that there are people who know more than you, who can act as teachers. It also means that you know that your knowledge and wisdom are always limited, and that there is always more to learn, and you can always expand your consciousness. It's a dynamic process. You can see it as a process of sending or inspiring, and receiving or being inspired. That sending and receiving, inspiring and being inspired, requires conscious attunement. You can imagine this as consciously attuning yourself to the frequency of the message of wisdom, attuning yourself to the higher self within us, allowing us to resonate with the message of the messengers mentioned earlier, with the wisdom they bring. They send out ideas, and we receive their ideas, which we convert into our own thoughts that work for us. It is not about attuning to the form of the message or the messenger, but to the underlying spiritual message. You receive this underlying message of wisdom intuitively, as a flash of insight. And it is often difficult to put into words at first. Only later do you see the logic and rationality of it. Well, simply put, you need a link to the universal source of inspiration, whose message is passed on from heart to heart, right into your own heart. And that link is made by listening inwardly to the message, by awaking inwardly. As explained in the previous lecture, the Lords of Wisdom and Compassion always conveys the universal message. They are a link, and they try to do so in a way that we are receptive to. The flow that goes from heart to heart can increase and knows no physical boundaries. However, the flow does encounter resistance that must be overcome in order to flow better. You can therefore learn to receive the message of wisdom more and more clearly, which goes hand in hand with letting go of noise caused by old, personal, ingrained thoughts, by learning to think more clearly and becoming wiser. It involves lifting the veils that once covered your thoughts, seeing through the illusions of a personal self that is separate from others, further opening your inner spiritual heart to receive more of the flow of wisdom and compassion. On the steps we've mentioned earlier, your heart being touched, working from a pure heart or a selfless motive, the search for wisdom with an eager intellect, and the desire to obtain an unveiled spiritual vision are not steps that follow each other linearly. They are much more parallel processes. We are touched by something, want to help, search for answers, share our knowledge, gain self-knowledge, realize that our motive is not entirely pure, work on that, and see through our illusions with the help of the universal wisdom of the messengers, are thereby touched even more deeply and continue our search for wisdom within ourselves and in the world to help others. And so it goes on and on. Well, everyone listening to this lecture probably has an intuitive idea of what is meant with this. We have discussed wisdom and compassion and the transmission of the flow from the source throughout the hierarchy of life. A third facet in the flow, also mentioned in the title of the symposium, is peace. The Lords of Wisdom and Compassion, mentioned earlier, is also called the Lords of Wisdom, Compassion and Peace. Because living in peace is the implementation of wisdom and compassion. This does not mean wanting to keep the peace, but actively creating harmony. It is not about watching helplessly, but about protecting greater values, such as freedom of thought and the opportunity of everyone to develop their qualities. Part of developing wisdom is learning to recognize that all messengers convey the same message, even if they express it in a different form, a different guise. If representatives of different spiritual movements see through and recognize that only the names of concepts and principles differ, but that there is a unity of vision, then a very important foundation for peace is at hand. The message that all messengers bring is that it is possible to create a society in which everyone shares the vision of universal unity, which aims to shape active brotherhood, in which everyone can contribute from their own unique qualities, and we focus on creating a truly peaceful society. The focus is not on personal wishes and needs, but on the whole. Not fierce competition to get rich or excessive pressure to perform, but cooperation. Not individual struggle for existence, but equality for all. While in such a society, everyone can always feel connected to the whole. Unity is consciously recognized. We receive the flow of wisdom and compassion and pass it on. We rise above our personal past and present and work toward a shared future for humanity as a whole. We then rise above the parties, do not honor enemy images, and do not take sides. In his Tao Te Ching, Paradox 49, Lao Tse gives us a good challenge for a peaceful society. In this paradox, he says, I am good to the good because they are good. And I am good to the not good so that they may become good. And that is the same in terms of intention, but can take different forms in practice. And we would like to discuss what that means in practice with you later during the workshop. While creating such a society does not happen automatically, and as mentioned earlier, requires each of us to take an active role, to open our spiritual hearts, to investigate, to exercise discernment, and to build an unclouded vision. But if we manage to hold on to the insight we've gained, we will no longer be discouraged, but will be equanimous and persevere, knowing that unity is the reality. Unfortunately, there are already many people who are examples of this. Consider, for example, the writer Victor Hugo, who, with his speech on world peace in 1849, entitled There Will Come a Day, wanted to make others see that there would be a time without war in the world. In the centuries before that, no one could imagine that there would be peace within France alone. And now there was a united France. Surely a united Europe would follow. And ultimately, world peace, a brotherhood of people. Or think of Martin Luther King's speech, I Have a Dream, in which he speaks of his dream that one day we will take it for granted that all people are created equal. That children of former slaves and slave owners will sit together at a table of brotherhood. And that his 4 children will one day live in a country where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the nature of their character. Consider also a singer like John Lennon, who brought the song Imagine into the world to share an image, a vision of unity. Well, and part of that text goes like this. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. And I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one. And also consider examples from your own environment. Everyone knows one or more individuals who noticeably influence the atmosphere positively when they enter a room. With a more insightful, compassionate way of thinking, they can create an atmosphere in which other people can relax, feel that they are not being judged, feel that they belong, and that they are allowed to develop based on their own qualities. So it is also good to think about who you know in your immediate circle who already lives this way, perhaps unconsciously, based on the realization that you can strengthen each other through cooperation. Because the more people with an open heart, an inquiring mind, and an unclouded spiritual vision we have creating such an atmosphere, the greater and stronger this atmosphere becomes. That is what we are trying to achieve with this symposium. More people who develop an unclouded spiritual vision, want to live according to it, and thus contribute to wisdom, compassion, and peace. Finally, a few concluding remarks before we go to the workshop to explore these ideas further together. We have tried to make it clear that there is nothing more logical than reasoning and living from the logic of the heart. And this involves recognizing universal unity and opening your own spiritual heart to consciously learn to receive and pass on the flow of wisdom and compassion from the heart of the universe. Every person can learn to transform the inspiration they receive into a vision that is as clear as possible, and then live according to that vision in lasting peace. Well, so far this lecture.